All right, I'll say greetings this evening of your time as you create time to exist. How are you all? Oh, thank you very much. Allow me to begin this interaction with the following title. Point of power. Your particular society, as do, shall we say, several other physical societies, tend to, shall we say, create time in a particularly fascinating way, whereby you have what you call before, during, and after. Now, interestingly enough, though you have a sense of what has come before and what it is that, shall we say, as you say, is to come, you always only ever actually exist or experience the moment you call right now. So what this means is that in a now moment, you recreate a past. You project a future. And in that sense, then maintain a relationship and a vested interest in that sense to your relationship to the past and the future in such a way where many times you neglect what is happening right now. Understand that although things or events sequentially from a set of steps from a past may lead to a present or now moment, that is where the relationship ends. There is no causal, in that sense, relationship in the present from the past. There is no effect that the past can have on the present until you say or you determine that it does. For in that now moment, you then create the effect from a quote-unquote seeming past, but you create it right here, right now. So therefore, yes, you feel the effects seemingly of a past, but it is not from the past itself having a hold on you. It is from your interpretation in the moment, your attitude in the moment, and ultimately your actions in the moment. For if those actions reflect a high degree of belief that the past does, in that sense, affect the present, then you create an effect that seems to provide the evidence that it does. That seems to continuously provide a rationale that the past does affect the present. But that is merely something that you do in the now moment. Therefore, the now moment is always your point of power. For since you always ever exist in the now, it is always eternally right now. You can always change your reality right now. For there is no other time. When you are willing to begin to look at that, you are not remembering a past that is quote-unquote still there, but recreating the past from the present, right now. You will understand that right now is all that matters. Right now is the point at which you make any determination or relationship to a past or a future. So right now is the time that you can change that idea. Your particular manifestation, physically speaking, of your reality results generally from 3 steps. Number 1, in a given now moment from a given set of circumstances, you have an interpretation. In general, you will ascribe a positive or negative interpretation to a particular given situation. Now understand the situation in and of itself is a blank set of props with no built-in meaning. You assign the meaning. And if it is something that is generally societally labeled bad, and you then buy into that and automatically label it negative, then you cannot help in that sense but get a negative effect from that neutral symbol. But the opposite is also true. It is always your choice in any given now moment to remember that the symbol that the event has really no built-in meaning until you assign it. And that perhaps, yes, there are certain aspects of a given situation which may on the surface seem negative. That is not the only thing or the only message that the circumstance has built into it. For when we say all situations are neutral, that neutrality is expressed as 100% potentiality for a negative manifestation, but also 100% potentiality for a positive. And this means that are you to ascribe a positive meaning to something which you heretofore have ascribed a negative meaning to, you cannot help but get a different effect out of it. For in, again, each now moment, what you do is interpret from that blank set of props whether you, in that sense, will choose, perhaps sometimes not consciously, but now we are speaking of doing it consciously, to label it negative or positive. Now, we had said that it, in that sense, is in 3 steps. Step 1 in each now moment is your interpretation. Once you interpret something as either perhaps negative or positive, you then assume an attitude with that particular interpretation as a foundation. So therefore, again, to extrapolate, if you give a negative interpretation, you in general will assume a negative attitude or posture. If you give a positive interpretation, then in that sense you are more likely to assume a positive attitude. And lastly, you then act, you then do in the moment, right now, something with that interpretation and that attitude as a foundation. And it is ultimately the doing of that thing right now that creates your reality, that manifests your reality physically, because it is the actions that are the movers in that sense in your physical world right now. Therefore, you always in any given now moment have the opportunity, have the advantage to understand that you get to choose the interpretation. You get to choose. For regardless of whether or not, in that sense, you do consciously decide to choose or not, choose you will. Though perhaps if it is from a negative perspective, the choice will be somewhat automatic and unconscious. What we are discussing is the waking up in the now moment, the only time you ever exist. In any given situation, when you find yourself with, shall we say, an outdated interpretation, an interpretation that, oh no, here it comes again, for example, is a negative interpretation, presupposing that that is, in a sense, happening to you rather than from you. And when in that sense you say, oh no, here it comes, that is an interpretation with a negative, shall we say, backhand. And therefore can only result in a negative attitude, and then your actions will subtly or perhaps blatantly then manifest or represent that negative attitude. You can always, in that sense, take back your point of power. You can always, in that sense, create a, shall we say, gap or a lag or a pause between the interpretation and the action. For again, if your interpretation is, shall we say, negative, and in that sense you assume a negative attitude, but you then do nothing, you cannot then get the negative manifestation. It is the doing stage, in that sense, that creates the reality. So therefore, this gives you the liberty, the license to think whatever you wish, as long as you do not automatically then act with those thoughts as a foundation. Therefore, you can now begin to reinterpret according to preference. You can now understand, all right, something perhaps which in the past I have labeled negative is occurring. Obviously, I can see what is negative about it. In the past, when I have interpreted it this way, had my attitude, performed my actions, I have only gotten a negative result out of it. Therefore, I have absolutely nothing to lose by at least placing a pause before I do anything. And giving myself the opportunity, in that sense, to reinterpret from the perspective of a creator, of a conscious manifestor. And you can always reinterpret something which you had initially assigned a negative meaning or label to by asking yourself the simple wild card question. Wild card meaning you can pull it out of your deck anytime. How does this serve me exactly the way it is? In what way is this symbol that I have created of assistance to me? What is it, for instance, forcing me to look at? What is it, for instance, indicating about what I still may believe in a limiting sense? You can always, by simply asking, how is this of service to me exactly the way it is, get at least some negative, shall we say, alternative option. In other words, the positive. Some positive interpretation. For if you look at how it serves you, or what it, shall we say again, forces you in that sense to look at, you can then simply consciously derive that service or consciously choose to look at what you have created a symbol to force you to look at because you wish to look at it, and then no longer need the symbol to prod you from behind. The now moment is truly your point of power, for it is eternal. It always was right now. Never was there a time where you could say it is not right now. And in that sense, so that shall by extension continue. It will always eternally be now. So therefore, there is no path that you need dig up and in that sense be responsible for integrating every aspect of it in a tenuous and tortuous manner. For when in that sense you simply begin to derive your actions and your creatorhood from the now moment, you automatically will create any opportunity to bring up any limiting belief, which, yes, you may have bought into in your past, but it is not inherently the path itself that is important. It is the fact that you give yourself the opportunity to look at beliefs which no longer serve you. And you always will give yourself that opportunity. One of the greatest signs or signals that you are creating in a given now moment, a particular belief which no longer serves you, is what you call negative emotion. Emotion itself is always a direct result of a belief system with no exceptions. No exceptions. Therefore, whatever you feel, you always feel because you believe something. Therefore, anytime you have a negative emotion in the now moment, right now, you can always ask yourself, if you do not choose to just automatically from that negative interpretation, assume a negative attitude, perform negative actions, and simply get the negative reality, if you place a pause in there, you can always interpret, what must I believe right now? Right now. From what is happening right now. Not yesterday, not last year, not when I was a child. Right now. What must I believe to be feeling this? And if you are honest, you will always come up with a limiting belief. A belief which perhaps you will say, well, yes, I do believe that. And boy, is that dated. That no longer applies to who I choose to be. But now that I have found the belief, now that I have drummed it up, it is no longer even important how or when I created it. What is important is, now I know I have this belief. And when you own the belief, you can change it. And that is the only way you can change a belief. You cannot change a belief by assuming the new belief in denial of the old belief. The old belief will always, in that sense, subtly affect your actions and, through the filtration of those actions, bring itself back to the quote-unquote surface. You cannot escape your true beliefs. But the good news is that once you do accept them, acknowledge them, own them, you can change them. When in that sense you believe something, that, shall we say, lays down the blueprint for how you will interpret it, and for the attitude that you will then assume and the actions that you will then take. Therefore, you always act as though you believe something. So once you acknowledge the belief that you no longer prefer, you can then extrapolate how you have been acting because you have that belief. And you can see that it was those actions that gave the effect of the limiting belief in your life. This is half the key to changing to the preferred belief. For this, in that sense, lays down for you how you create with that old limiting belief. You act as though you believe it. And those actions put into place physically the reality. Therefore, once you acknowledge a belief in the now moment that you no longer prefer, you may use the tool of your imagination rather than as an escape, rather than as a fantasy. The tool of your imagination to create a new blueprint, a new template, a new model. And briefly, simply as follows, close your eyes. Picture the new preferred you. Picture in that sense the you in that sense prefer to be with the new belief you already have. And picture it until you can feel what that new belief feels like. For anything you believe will always again result in an emotion. And when you consciously choose to believe something and invoke it, speak it, state it, if you do it with conviction in that moment in isolation, you will create the feeling of the new belief. And when you feel that, you will then be able to picture, if you will, how you would act if you truly believe the new belief. You will see that those actions will always differ from the actions you have generally been doing to get the negative result. And you will see in that sense right in front of you, in the now moment, options. Rather than automatic tendency to, shall we say, commit an act with a negative foundation. You now have options. Here is how the old negative me would act. Here is how the new preferred me would act. And I will venture to guess that side by side, the preferred you, the new blueprint you in your imagination, the actions that you performs will simply be far easier to choose. For now that you have given yourself the option, it is far more representative of who you wish to be. And therefore, by simply acting as the new you that your imagination has laid down as a blueprint, in acknowledgement of the old belief, you now create the reality, the effect, right now, of the new belief in the same way that you already created the old. So there is nothing in that sense new to learn here. Simply a slight shift in perspective of how to apply what you already flawlessly apply in your creations. And the fact that, again, you always exist right now means that any now moment you can take back your power. You can have that moment be the fulcrum for your point of expressing your power according to preference. Perhaps we can, in that sense, summarize and simplify what we have said. Before you act, before you do anything, particularly when what you are about to do comes from a negative foundation, if you will always at least provide yourself with one positive alternative from your imagination, from the referential, preferential you that you create within your imagination, I again will venture to guess that you will always find it far simpler to do the thing that is, again, representative of who you wish to be. And merely the providing of the option, your willingness to take the action step of providing that option will have that new positive perspective, that new positive approach and action be far more attractive and make it that much simpler to choose and implement than the old. And one by one, as your actions now reflect the new preferred you, again, in acknowledgement of the old beliefs, not denial, one by one, the results of your life, the results of your actions begin to transform your life right now, immediately, across the board. When you decide to change in that way, and that is simply all there is to it, the simple decision, I wish to change from this to this. You may understand that in making the decision that you wish to change, because now is the only time that ever exists, in that now moment, you have changed already. The mere conception of the idea of the change is the same as being the change. Now you can continue then to create a continuity with the old you and make it seem like a passing thing. Or in that sense, you can just decide, I have changed. Because I say so, because I desire to. Because I know I create right now, and right now I decide to change. Then secondly, trust in that change. See where in that sense you are not trusting in it, and provide the alternative of trusting in it. And lastly, act as though you trust you have changed. And any given now moment that you are willing to do this in this way, you then transform completely, immediately, and wholly. To the degree that you are willing to accept that you can. And since you make all the rules, it's up to you. Therefore, change in a sense can be something which is a lengthy process. Can be in that sense something whereby you analyze every aspect of your past. Obviously that also works, and we are not saying that what we are saying is any better. However, it is another way, and perhaps works faster if indeed we are understanding correctly that it is the desire of you, both individually and collectively as a society, do desire to change immediately. And that immediate change can be expressed from the simple decision to change. Again, the trust that I have changed and not allowing anything to provide contrary evidence, reinterpreting it, and then acting as though you trust you have changed. That is all there is to it. All the stuff that you have analyzed from your past, again, if it is significant, if in that sense it truly does limit you, it will come up. But you will not have to find it. It will find you. And generally, once again, in the form of a negative emotion or a negative interpretation. Your point of power is eternal. You are multidimensional and eternal beings. You are expressing yourself finitely as physical beings right now for particular reasons. But your sense of your eternalness can be, shall we say, at least approached from the perspective that it is always, forever, right now. That no matter when, it is now. Never was there a moment that you existed in your life when it was not right now. Therefore, this is your consistent access to your creatorhood. Your direct access to your creatorhood. When you spend your now moment recreating a non-preferred past, projecting a non-preferred future, you in general do so at the cost of what is right in front of your face. Right now in front of your face. And if you are willing to ground yourself back into the now moment, the form that takes is when something comes up asking yourself, well, right now is the only time I ever exist. Right now is the only time I can ever act from. The thing that I am looking at right now, is it something I can do something about right now? If the answer is yes, go right ahead. If the answer is no, then it is a distraction. Then, because you cannot act upon it and are placing attention upon it, you are looking at it at the cost of what is right there. So if you ask yourself this question and the answer is no, I cannot do anything about it, push that aside. Then look at what is right here, right now. That is how you reground yourself into the moment in any given moment with that simple question. For you can only act on certain options in a given moment in the way that you lay down the succession in that sense, so to speak, of now moments. And therefore, should you place your attention and concentrate on what you can act upon, there will always be a relevant set of choices. And from those choices, there will always be something which excites you, which gives you more passion, more desire than the others. And if you are willing from what is available, not from what is not, from what is available in any given moment, to use that barometer within you of your excitement, of your gravitation toward, of your passion for, as a criteria to choose from what is available, you will then always express the choice that is directly indicative of the choice of, perhaps you can say, your higher self, or the choice that is representative of what is most you in this life. For excitement itself is the vibratory energy that tells you what is most you. That is why it excites you and nobody else. It is the sign that many of you have been asking for. Oh, I need a sign. The sign is your excitement. Many times something very exciting comes along and you say, not right now, I'm looking for my sign. But that is your sign. That is why you feel that way. Uniquely, you feel that way. Therefore, your point of power can always be acted upon in a positive way. By providing at least one positive alternative, by recreating the referential, preferential you to do so. This is always immediately available. And though at first it may seem as a series of steps, your willingness to even approach it in this way in and of itself is an action and a statement to the universe. And will then reorient your entire reality toward that preference. And the process, so to speak, will become simply automatic. Whereby you automatically and effortlessly will provide to yourself the positive alternative representative of who you now choose to be, rather than perhaps somebody that everyone said you should be. You get to decide who you wish to be. Even if you decide that you wish to be what everyone else says you should be. That is still your choice. But only you can know. Only you can know if it excites you. And only you, if you are willing to act from what is available on the thing that excites you with integrity, only you can create your life in a positive way. It is very simple. It is that simple. Now it will be up to you to allow it to be that simple, or to add as many intervening steps as you feel you need in order to validate the change. But ultimately, that is all changes anyway. A decision on your part to change, and then either trusting in that change and getting the results of it, or trusting in what you perceive to be a process that then results in your validating the change. So it's the same result. You still finally validate the change, and it is the validation of the change that makes the change, not the process. So we are not denigrating processes, and we understand in that sense that they can be valuable, but are simply suggesting that it is, in a sense, an elaborate game that you play to give yourself permission to say, all right, I've done enough work. I can now give myself permission to change. Here is the homework to prove it. And that is one way to go about it. But it takes more time. And if you wish for your reality to be transformed right now, right here, go right ahead. It is up to you. It is your point of power. In exchange for your willingness to open up within you the many doors, to break down the walls separating yourselves into many parts, and begin now to unfold into your wholeness, into your totality. We thank you and express our unconditional love to you for your willingness to share this with us. It brings us great joy in that sense to share with your experience, to relish your particular perspectives. For every creation, every aspect of creation itself is unique and has something unique to offer. We understand this, and in that sense see everyone that we interact with, for the societies that have every one, a gift of creation itself. And it is our extreme pleasure to unwrap you, and in that sense relish the contents that you choose to share with us. Therefore, in exchange for your willingness to do so, I ask you now, how may I be of service to you? Shouldn't